Hey guys, I'm Melhorn. In this video, I'm going to go over what I think is the best catfish rig, whether you're fishing from the bank or from a boat, and that's the Santee rig. We're going to go over all the variables, how to tie it, all the different things you can do to tweak this rig to your style of fishing. What you're going to need is, one, you're going to need some type of leader material. In this case, I've got some Andy 60-pound clear monofilament. This can be lighter depending on how you're fishing. Generally, I don't think you need anything heavier than this. I've run 50 before. Depending on what you've got in the waters you're fishing, you could go with 30-pound leader material. You're going to need some kind of weight. I'm going to show you these drifting weights. They're flexible. They're like a little snake. They're wormy and they bend and all that kind of stuff. We got those. But you're also going to need something that is a little more traditional. We'll go over why here in a minute. You're going to need some hooks. I got the backstabbers. These are 6/0 hooks from Hooker's Terminal Tackle. You're going to need a snap swivel. That's one of these little babies right here. You're going to need one of those, and you're going to need some type of float. Now, there's a lot of variables when it comes to floats. We're going to talk about that also. So let's get started. Get some of this stuff out of the way. First thing I'm going to do is pull me off some leader material. How big a piece? Generally about like that, to be perfectly honest. I get about 18 to 20 inches. Give yourself a little bit more. As I always say when tying rigs, it's always better to have a little bit more. What we're going to do is start on the end where the swivel is, and this is the swivel here. You can see it's got a snap on one end. That's what you will attach your sinker to. And on the other end there's a swivel. I tie my leader material onto this end right here, the one that is closest or on the opposite end of where the snap is. The reason I do that is it allows this line, this leader, this bait as it floats up to twist and turn, or it doesn't allow it to get twisted up, I should say. It allows it to turn freely. What I'm going to do is an improved clinch knot. You saw me get started on it. It's muscle memory very quickly. Once you tie this thing a few times, you'll have it. Go through there just like that. And what you're going to do is wrap this line around itself. Go around there about 4, 5, 6 times. Very simple knot, also known as a fisherman's knot. You're going to come right back through that little opening right there. Now you could pull it tight at this point. You'd have a clinch knot, but we're going to do the improved clinch knot. You're through there, the lowest loop that you got, and you're going to come back through. I use my teeth to get it started, and then you can pull it on down. Bang. There you go. That's all there is to it. Cut off that little tag in there to get that out of the way. You've got a snap swivel on your leader line now. The next thing you're going to do is you're going to put your float on. Any size float will work. It all depends on how big your bait is. I got some different sizes here. This company here, you can get these on Amazon. Nycrusis, I believe is how it's pronounced. You can order these on Amazon. They got multiple different sizes in it. That's what these came out of. I'll put you a link down below where you can check it out. Depending on what size bait you're using will determine which float. Generally, I'm not using the super small ones. Usually it's something in these 3 ranges, but if you're fishing for small fish where you're at, these will work because you're not going to be fishing with big baits if you're fishing in this area. So we'll get these out of the way. We'll just go with the big one now so you can see. You'll thread that on there. Poof, just like that. And I just let it lay freely for now because you got to put your hook on next. And I'll show you how to adjust that where I dial it in at. Get these hooks out. Hooker's Terminal Tackle sells a lot of these circle hooks that are very similar to what Gamakatsu makes and Owner makes. They're good hooks, they're affordable at a good price. I snell my hooks, and to do that, I go through the eye, just like that. Run that line parallel to the shank of the hook, and then I'm going to make a loop. Pinch it there, and then I'm going to wrap around the other line that was down the shank of the hook and around the shank of the hook. This is a lot harder to do when I'm trying to show it to the camera than it is just doing it. I tag literally thousands of these a year, so get it through there. You come back through. If I can get that around there one more time. It's going to be through like that, and this is where you'll pull it tight just to get it started with my teeth. And then boom, that cinches down tight on there. Trim off that end, and bang. What you will need inside one of these bags inside one of these bags, there are the little float pegs, little pegs that come with it. And this is used to pin your float in place. Generally, for me, I put it about 1/3 the length of the leader from the hook. And what that does is that will float your bait up off of the bottom. One thing I forgot to tell you was you got to put a sinker on this thing, and that's where this snap comes in right there. Now this is a flexible snake weight that I use drifting. This thing bends and turns. It's about 2 ounces. It goes over stuff. It's a great weight when you're moving. Now, a lot of people ask, can you use this rig when you're anchored up? You absolutely can. It's actually the rig that I use. One suggestion is you can use this weight anchored up. It sinks. I mean, it's a sinker. But it doesn't cast as good, and it's mainly because of the whippy action going through the air. That is where I suggest you swap this out and go with, this here's a cannonball sinker. You can go with a bank sinker. You can go with a pyramid sinker, whatever works for you to get it out there. That is the great thing about using the snap. It is very user friendly, and it allows you a lot of options weight wise. Now when you tie this rig onto your line, what I do is I tie it on to this end of the swivel, the same end of the snap swivel that the snap is attached to. And again, a simple fisherman's knot is all you need to do this. It's not complicated. Improved clinch knot, they'll all work. Fast, easy knot to tie. Boom. Boom. That's off of there. Like I said, I travel without the weight on it just so it's not banging into stuff, but all you got to do when you get to the water, decide what weight you're using. If you're drifting from a boat or if you're bank fishing, you put that on there and that's set to go. Again, this weight will pin down on the bottom and it will float up. This cork will suspend that bait up off the bottom out of stuff to where a fish can come up and hit it. Now, one of the many variables with using this rig that you have some control over is the size of the float. The size of the float is very important, especially if you're using very large, bigger baits. Adding a float this size to the rig is going to support a lot more weight and a much bigger bait than using something considerably smaller. So keep that in mind. If you're using big baits, you're going to want to add a big float to keep it suspended off the bottom. Another thing is adding one of these rattling floats to your rig. This one is a Demon Dragon. There's a lot of different people that make them. It's basically a Zara spook. It's a topwater lure that has some little beads inside of it and makes some noise. Some people feel it helps them catch fish. What I do when adding one of these, I just thread mine on there. You can tie a couple of knots in a couple of different places to do it. But what I do is I put it onto the line like that, tie my swivel back on, and then I just use electrical tape tied around here to hold it in place. Some people have used bobber stops and some different stuff. Again, you can tie this thing directly on to both ends. A lot of people will do that. It's a couple of extra knots, but I like the security of having that one line going all the way through there. No more knots, no points of failure. And like I said, a piece of electrical tape around it holds it in place and you're good to fish. Now, one word of warning about this end of the rig right here at this connection. People have asked about putting a sinker slide on the main line so that basically you could have a weight sliding up and down this line. I'm not a big fan of that because what can happen is, especially if you're anchored up or bank fishing, the boat's not moving, you're not dragging this weight. The float, if it's heavy enough, can float your bait up off the bottom. And when it does, it's gonna pull the rig higher in the water column. So you think it's down on the bottom, 2 to 3 feet, but if it floats up because you've got slack line, your bait can actually come to the top. That may or may not be something you want, and that's why I like controlling where that's at, where it's secured at by having this weight pinned in place. Over the years, I've done a lot of videos about the Santee rig, but I think in this one, I tried to cover about everything I know about it. And hopefully, it gives you some input, some ideas, and some info about some of the variables that are involved in using this rig. You can go from a very, very simple one with just an old styrofoam float, the way it started way back when, all the way up to something a lot more complicated with one of these fancy rattling shads and these worm weights and everything else. So there's a lot of options for you. Biggest thing is try them out, see what works for you, and get out there and fish.